Let me introduce our next speaker, Blas Pérez Henríquez, who's a countryman of mine, when I found out today, from Mexico. And he's the director of the Center for Environmental Public Policy here at UCB. His research is distinguished by a focus on the interaction of policy implementation with that of policy adaptation and evolution, particularly in the context of emission trading. He's examined the use of information technology to support environmental market creation and collaborative efforts between business and government to support low emission carbon economy. He received his MA and PhD in public policy from UCB, and he will talk to us today on climate smart policy, carbon pricing, investment, and marginalized communities. Let me welcome Blas.
Thank you, Martin. Well, I come from a very different perspective. As you heard, I work with business, I work on cap and trade, what's called sort of smart policy making. So I will be talking more about the institutional side and the policy implementation. But I have a theory of why I've been invited by Martin and Jane Malden because of some recent work in Mexico. So this is my idea, my agenda. I'll present really quick about what I do, some of the general challenges on global climate policy making and the impact on the poor, the work I'm doing with the International Development Law Organization on Mexico, climate and the poor, and new developments in regional cooperation between Mexico and California, and why they are significant in the global context, and then propose that we need to start looking more at or enhancing the institutional perspective as we analyze these problems. So as I was saying, I just recently I published a book on the institutional history of emissions trading, so we can talk about it, and even the equivalence of taxes and cap and trade. And most recently, an edited volume in collaboration with Oxford, University of British Columbia, and Melbourne University on how to engage businesses in this process. So one of the big challenges that we are facing now is that so far, we started in Rio trying to address the global common issues. We are looking at oceans, biodiversity, and climate change. It's been more than 20 years, and the process has been slow. We haven't accomplished much. This was just recently, the poor are very worried about this. Some countries might not even exist in the near future. They are buying land in Australia to move their population. We are out of whack in terms of our policy goal at the global level. We have a lot of work to do if we really want to not be extinct. And adaptation will require a lot of work, especially to address the issues of the poor, protect the Amazon, desertification, slow desertification and deforestation, and the impacts on the poor. My colleague Sol will talk a lot about that. He's an expert in that area. So we keep working at it. We just had Climate Week, a lot of awareness, a lot of demonstrations. I was there. Business are engaged. Everybody wants to do something. We're going to Lima, all excited. Supposedly, we're going to do something. Everything is going to happen in Paris, as we said it was going to happen in Copenhagen. We'll see. So we do have a technological challenge. This is from a group that is normally opposed to some of these policy action because of these realities. We need to invest a lot of money to sustain our energy needs, and but we also have to find a way to do the clean energy transition. But still, we have this technological locking that we are depending on fossil fuels. This is probably you've seen this map, but there's sorry for that. There's an inequality in who has access to electricity. But as you can see, some of the countries that are the large emerging economies.
You've got to turn it on.
Oh, so okay, that's a good thing. Well, you can see Mexico, you can see India, you can see Asia. It's electrification is going on, but the important thing is what is going to be the energy mix that is going to be supplying power to these countries, and we need to address that issue. Also, there's the issue of that we need to deploy rapidly clean technology, but there's an issue of IPR. There was some would say a mistake in the initial negotiations in which the developer actually offered to give for free clean tech, do clean tech transfer, but obviously that doesn't play very well with business and innovation, and as we, economists know that this is not a good way to incentivize innovation. So we've talked about new mechanisms to finance our transition. This has been, we have huge needs, 100 billion a year at least. In Cancun, at that conference of parties, it was decided to create a green climate fund. Unfortunately, a fund without money is no fun. So that's what's going on right now. And this is the most sort of recent news from Climate Week. We were talking about, Americans believe in climate change. Maybe there's no connection with if they are willing to pay or not. But the truth is that in Washington, polarization has limited all capacity to do anything on this issue. And it's a global issue. It's not only in America. We have to do. We have to help. And Oates wrote that the only way to do this is through wealth transfers, and we need to accept that. So there's a group called B20. They're actually working now at the G20 in Australia. It's sort of businesses getting together and working. There are groupies of the world leaders, and they go around and they actually are saying the right things. These are smart policies, smart climate policies. They're all they're engaged. There's a Sustainable World Business Council. The CEO, Paul Polman of Unilever, is saying, I went to a conference recently, he's saying all the right things, and they're willing to engage. It's just the transition is costly, as I said. So this is why I think I got invited. I mentioned this recent work at a faculty retreat at the Goldman School, and I think Jane Molden picked on that, and that's why she invited me. I've been working with the International Development Law Organization. It's a multilateral organization, observer of the UN, that promotes justice through the rule of law. And they work in collaboration with the UN on developing legal instruments for low carbon development. And with support with the International Fund of Agricultural Development, we started this work in Mexico. So I'll give you a little bit of a context about Mexico. It's the emerging economy of North America. It's becoming wealthier, and when you're wealthier, you care more for green goods and good quality of life. It's also the youngest country in the NAFTA region, so that matters in terms of regional competitiveness. And you'll hear what I have to say about taking advantage of that in terms of investment. Growth, younger population, higher demand for goods and services and transportation. So there's a possibility that Mexico goes from 11th or 10th largest emitter to the 6th if it goes unchecked or without help from the rest of the world. This is difficult to read, but it's just to show that Mexico has been doing its homework, working in the international arena and developing the right institutions in Mexico and in the legal frameworks, regulatory frameworks. Again, this is just to show that it's a very comprehensive plan. It touches upon all the important areas, mitigation, adaptation, and in general how to address the issue from a structural perspective. So this is again the list. Actually, Mexico is the second country in the world to have passed a federal climate law just after the UK. Since the Calderon administration, Mexico has shown leadership. It hosted a COP16 in Cancun, where the Green Climate Fund was agreed. These are, again, the right buzzwords in the policy context: low carbon development, resilient Mexico, and institutional coordination. The ambition is pretty high. this administration is realizing that and is actually addressing the issue that how much is this going to cost us. So, but it looks like the camp that believes that, well, we already said this, now we have to work to meet these goals, is winning. The president of Mexico in Climate Week ratified this commitment, and even though Mexico is a developing country, already put some money forward for the Green Climate Fund along with Germany. Mexico is undergoing huge structural transformation, has passed reform in tax reform, telecommunications. You know, it was an industry that was highly concentrated, created the richest man in the world, Carlos Slim, through Telmex, and energy. They call it the mother of all reforms. This was a taboo in the Mexican institutional and political context. So now the energy sector has been open to private investment, and the state-owned enterprises will have to compete in that context as productive enterprises of the state. So as I was saying, the Peña Nieto administration is a little bit more cautious, it's being more realistic, and it's actually putting real targets. The Calderon administration was more on the leadership side and on the aspirational side, while also saying that this was all contingent to international cooperation. So this is now included in the National Development Plan, and actually surprised the world by introducing what some call a climate smart policy, a carbon tax. And this is going to allow some of the private sector to develop projects to get a tax rebate through the Mexican Stock Exchange, as they created what's called the Mexican Carbon Platform. We'll see how this works in reality. So, but we're talking about inequality, and there's another Mexico. The south of Mexico it's behind in terms of development. There's the farther the communities are from urban centers, the poorer they are. As you can see, 61% of the indigenous population live in extreme poverty, as opposed to 90% of non-indigenous, and a lot of the households are single parent, and women, the responsible species, takes care of the family. But Chiapas and Oaxaca have the poorest municipalities in the whole country. So the work I've been involved with ITLO is to first assess what's the institutional framework. As you saw, it's pretty developed at the federal level. It's not as developed at the local level. So we're trying to identify the gaps and formulate innovative strategies to address climate issues and foster sustainable agriculture and adaptation in the south, in the Mexican south. And these will be eventually also expanded to Colombia, Ecuador, and Guatemala as pilot projects for the rest of the south. So I know Frank mentioned the idea of connecting extreme climate events with climate change, but in the history of environmental policy, focusing events is what actually called for real policy action. Love Canal, and we can go through, and wealthier societies, scandals, and then there's real action, no? And so in Mexico, actually at the time we were doing the conference, it had just this Hurricane Manuel had just hit the coast of Guerrero, where Acapulco is, really hard, and then just 1 month after, it got hit again by Hurricane Raymond. This uncovered a lot of problems. Some say corruption, some say bad planning. I actually, at the meeting, there was people from the UNAM, the National University, that said that there were all these studies that had said to the urban planners, never build here. Of course, mayors said, we need to grow, we need to expand. So 16,000 houses were destroyed during that event. It was major impact to indigenous communities in the Sierras. They mudslides destroyed entire towns, and you know, Acapulco is a tourist town. This is the airport after these events. So of course, these type of things are calling for action at the local level, and that's why we're working. So I'm now going to try to connect my current research agenda as I say, I work with businesses, I work with cap and trade, business-friendly solutions for everyone. And so there's a lot of homework to be done in North America. As you know, Canada rejected Kyoto. Polarization hasn't allowed for climate legislation, although we have had a lot of progress in terms of regulatory approaches like the Mercury Rule, basically getting out of business all the coal-fired plants in the US. And now we're in line in the US to meet targets. And Mexico, as I was saying, it could be a major emitter if it's not helped and it doesn't invest in low carbon development. So, sorry, I got the wrong. So, as you know, California went alone. It's the leading climate jurisdiction. We talked about cap and trade. I put that for those, but it's been introduced already, so I don't need to explain it anymore. But this is a graphic of how it works. And so recently, there's been Governor Brown went in July to Mexico City to enhance cooperation, especially in this area of climate change. And the president of Mexico came a month after to ratify its commitment to these policies, because when Brown visited, it was in the midst of the energy reform process, so he didn't spend as much time as he wanted with the governor. So here you go, all the photo ops. This is the Climate, Environment, and Wildfires MOU, and then there was an energy MOU also. So these are some of the aspects. A lot of it is about policy assistance, the idea of trying to help Mexico develop a stronger institutional setup. So in the future, maybe there could be a linking with the carbon market here, which would be a very important thing for Mexico to have a carbon price signal from California. And there's another issue that we will talk about it. It's related again with the inequality, the issue of helping marginalized communities with forestry programs that through the RED concept. So just to put this in perspective, California right now has a linking agreement. Well, it has linked its carbon market with Quebec, but as you can see, bringing Mexico in adds scale to this process. It's again, in terms of emissions and what we're trying to achieve, it will be a very significant development if we can actually do that, and we can signal that to the rest of the world. So I believe that one of the ways that we can help is by creating wealth and bring business opportunities. And so first, some of the lessons from the California experience is that we realized, California has a very mature environmental justice movement. So it makes sure that these issues are addressed. That was the fire at the Richmond facility. So we have identified here in California that there could be major damages to the local communities, as if Richmond buys too many permits, obviously there's going to be more emissions, but there are co-pollutants that actually could impact heavily the local community. And so we've been working on ways to how to address these issues, there's now an investment plan to try to address all of these issues. These are all what's called the climate gap, is the idea of these co-pollutants affecting the local communities, the public health, and how we're going to address this through AB 32. We have new tools. Obviously in California it's more urban and industrial, but I think this could also educate the process in Mexico. I hope these kind of lessons could be transferred to the Mexican context. These are some of the, disadvantaged groups and racial minorities do live near point sources, and they're close, and obviously all of these has a major impact on health. So one of the good things about the cap and trade system is that it does produce revenue, and so we can invest to protect some of these communities, and also invest on projects that could help the way we've been developing, like changing our car-dependent society into a more transport-oriented and also investing in energy efficiency and clean energy, natural and water resources, but also in compensating this marginalized community, the disadvantaged communities. We have the experience of another smaller cap and trade system in the northeast of the United States. It's only for power plants, several states, and they've already invested almost 700 million in all of these type of projects that I have been talking about. So there's some dividend and benefit on how you can for the community and for the transition to a low carbon economy. In California, as I say, environmental justice may become a little bit of a hurdle for international cooperation, and this is a very politically contentious issue. There's huge opposition to taking any benefits of the cap and trade and the AB 32 to other regions. Hopefully this could be bridged, because in the case of Mexico, close partner, social, historical, political links. So there's a belief in Sacramento that if there's going to be a place where something like this would happen, would be with Mexico. And so that's what's so currently, based on the previous administration, Schwarzenegger signed an MOU with Chiapas, Mexico, and Acre, Brazil, to do these type of projects to supply offsets into the California AB 32 cap and trade system, and it could be a major investment to mitigate emissions as they produce carbon sinks. But as I was saying, it's a huge policy challenge for ARB and Cali PA. So it remains controversial. But it will be an important way of transferring wealth to these marginalized communities in Mexico. There's been a lot of work on it, and technically everything is ready to go, but again, it has been more of a political constraints that haven't allowed for this to happen. So also there's opposition by some environmental groups, because all these offsets are an additional cost containment policy feature, so it's outside the cap, so it's kind of giving them a free pass. It's very limited in California, but so it's an issue still to be worked out. And this is just so you see a little bit of the language that some of these groups use in terms of how they look at this type of policy feature within the carbon markets. So perhaps this is going to take us a little bit more time. So what I'm working on recently is more looking about taking advantage, as I was saying, of the demographic bonus of Mexico being the younger country, and the willingness of Mexico to develop its institutional framework to support a well-working carbon market. This is the World Bank has the PMR is called the Partnership for Market Readiness, and they're supporting the development of all the institutional features like MRV, measuring, reporting, and verification, and supporting all the institutional infrastructure that would working carbon market would require. And so these are right now the main focus of the Mexican environmental authorities, to try to true up its national registry. Before it was voluntary, now they want to make it real, as to be able to at some point link with California. Having a good registry of emissions and good MRV system is what is one of the key policy design features of a well-working system. And there will be new opportunities, because the state-owned enterprises before, they were constrained by political. For instance, Pemex was drained of all its resources because it paid for 30-40% of the actual expenditures of government, so there was no reinvestment, there was no possibility to have technological change. Now they could introduce cogeneration in the oil and gas production, and the Federal Electricity Commission as well could start doing some innovation in how they reduce emissions. And so as I was saying, taking advantage of this idea, I'm working on this on a forum in which we will explore how to make this happen. And so this is an example of how we could link our economies towards a low carbon future. And for instance, California right now it's the largest market for solar. This will continue to rise. It's expected to continue to rise, and it's part of the regulatory system through the renewable portfolio standards. So Mexico recently has, before it was at a competitive disadvantage with China because of lower cost of labor, but now it's actually lower than China, and you have regional proximity. There's also Mexico's part of NAFTA. The exchange rate is more transparent. There's some economic advantages of integrating supply chains, for instance, in high tech IT, which it's important for smart grids monitoring and reporting, as well as clean tech. And so there's Mexico's producing many engineers. A little known fact of Mexico is that high tech is actually developing because of more capacity in terms of engineering, and it has become a aerospace power with a lot of investment in this area. And so that's what we are exploring, that using that same model as it happened with the auto industry. Mexico's auto part power could then start producing more clean tech. And if you see a lot of the brands there are mostly European or Japanese. There's very little American or Californian. So I think there's a big business opportunity in this area. And so why is this important? Well, politically, if we expand the carbon market, we can show to the rest of the world that despite Washington, despite Ottawa, there's progress in policy developments in North America in climate and energy. In terms of the benefits for California, there's an expansion of the cost minimization opportunities for industry to comply with regulation, regional competitiveness, as I was saying. And but the emphasis that I want to do is that there's a lot of work to do in terms of developing a global carbon market, and this type of test bed for joining a developing country with a developed country, working in the expansion of the carbon market. The learning by doing, I think, is very important, as well as the policy alignment. So far we've been talking a lot about the pricing, about the technological solutions, but we have a deficit on working on the governance and the policy side, implementation, execution of these kind of policies. So this is basically my conclusion in terms of that we need to start working more on that, and that's what that's the future agenda in this context. So thank you very much.